It had been many years since Sophronia Lattimore had used her fan as a means of flirtatious communication. As a poor relation of 8 and 20, she was now too firmly ensconced amongst the chaperones to try to attract a gentleman's attention, but if one had noticed the frantic waving of her fan, he could have no doubt of the message it was sending. Sophie was desperately overheated. And she was not the only lady so afflicted. Odours of perfume and perspiration mingled in the warm air, causing Sophie to feel so stifled, she determined she must escape into the cool night if she were to maintain consciousness. Thankfully, her cousin had just joined a set, so Sophie had some time before Cecilia would be looking for her. She made her way around the perimeter of the overcrowded ballroom toward the French doors she'd espied across the room, and went through them onto a narrow balcony. She walked to the opposite end, away from the light of the ballroom, and took in some brisk, refreshing breaths. Lost in quiet contemplation of the night sky, she was startled when a couple came out of the ballroom onto the balcony. Before she could make her presence known, as she still stood in the shadows and they had not noticed her, they hurried into speech. "What exactly are you about, Priscilla?" the gentleman asked. "I don't know what you mean. Do not play games with me. It's quite obvious you're encouraging Lord Fitzwalter's suit. Do your promises mean nothing?" "Of course they do. And you will always have my heart, Charles. You must believe that. But I was only taking my own feelings into account, and I've since come to understand my family must be considered as well." She put out her hand in a pleading gesture. "Please, Charles, you cannot hold me to those promises. I was too young." "Or you've begun to envision yourself a countess." "You must realize I never expected or even desired to capture his notice. But now that I have, my mother... Oh, what's the use of speaking? You cannot possibly understand." "I think I understand all too clearly." The gentleman turned and left. The lady, whom Sophie had recognized as Miss Priscilla Hammond, followed a moment later. Alone again on the balcony, Sophie reflected on what she'd unintentionally heard. Miss Hammond's first London season had been an indubitable success, with Lord Fitzwalter at the forefront of the numerous gentlemen paying her court. That he was on the verge of a proposal was common knowledge, and the lady's acceptance was also a foregone conclusion. After all, what young woman from an undistinguished family of moderate means would turn down the opportunity to become a wealthy countess? But apparently Charles thought that Miss Hammond might do so in his favour. Sophie returned to her seat in the corner, still preoccupied with what she'd discovered. She sympathised with all the parties in this tangled affair. There was even a fourth person she knew to be affected. Her cousin's friend, Lucy Barrett, had confided in Cecilia that she was enamoured of Lord Fitzwalter and was in despair over his attentions to Miss Hammond. Lucy Barrett, though an attractive young woman, hadn't enjoyed the popularity that Miss Hammond had. A trifle shy, she tended to become overwhelmed in crowds and hesitated to put herself forward. She'd only come to know Lord Fitzwalter because he was a friend of her brother. It was a complicated business, this making of matches. And it was none of Sophie's affair if Lord Fitzwalter chose Miss Hammond over Miss Barrett. But would he really have decided upon Miss Hammond if he knew Miss Hammond and this Charles had made promises to each other? Was Miss Hammond merely acceding to the wishes and perhaps the pressure of her family? Sophie watched Miss Hammond for the next half-hour and found she did not seem like a young lady delighted by her beloved's attentions. Though she smiled at Lord Fitzwalter frequently enough, that smile just as instantly faded, replaced by a frown as soon as his head was turned. The person who looked most pleased by Lord Fitzwalter's attentions was Mrs. Hammond, who positively gloated at the sight of her daughter with the Earl.